All right, everybody, welcome back to Off the Grid on the Record, where we talk to the people actually moving the clean energy industry forward and not just talking about it. So, today's guest is Adeel Malik, Vice President of IntelliSun, a full-service solar energy company based in New York. IntelliSun helps homeowners and businesses lower energy bills, increase property value, and reduce carbon emissions through custom solar installs, energy storage, and clean energy consulting. They've built a name for themselves in the residential and, smart energy transition space. And Adil has, seen firsthand how tricky growth can be, even, when you're doing all the right things. So, Adil, how's it going, man?
Good, man. Good. I appreciate you reaching out. I like to do these things and share. It's really hard when you're in the thick of it to take the time to pause, reflect, and share what you've learned up until a certain point. So, I really appreciate you reaching out and I appreciate you setting this up.
Of course, man. It's an interesting spot to be in when things are growing, things are going well, even if things are starting to tank. You kind of get caught up in a little bit of everything, and you really need to take a step back and take a look at, how far you've really come. So, that being said, give us a bit of an introduction on and tell us on where you guys came from and, what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, I kind of, if we go way back, prior to the solar industry, I was actually in the science field. I'm a biology major, and I thought I was going to go to the dentistry route, and I kind of just fell into solar. I had a buddy at the time that was in the solar industry. I ended up leaving kind of the known path and decided to enter that world, and it was the best decision I ever made. This was at the peak of solar. This was during COVID. We were in Southern California where solar is a little bit well known. People are more receptive to it. So there was a lot of opportunity. We did well with advertising and marketing. We had an abundance of customers. We were scaling up the company. So it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot in a short period of time. I understood the value proposition, and it was a high ticket item, and it gave me an opportunity to kind of change my financial future. So very, very glad I did that.
That's massive. And
Yeah.
then, from the start there, how has your evolved, how has your role evolved since the company's founding, especially as the industry has, matured and become so much more competitive?
Yeah, good question. So, damn it, they call it the solar coaster for a reason. Um, there are lots and ups and downs, and I would say it's very volatile in comparison to other industries that are very steady. And that's because there are so many moving parts, there's so many variables. You're dealing with the city, you're dealing with utility companies, you're dealing with emotional homeowners and long timelines and setting proper expectations. And it's a very robust operation. And I think what people forget is solar is not just putting glass on roof. It's quite literally the construction business. And it's a big element of it takes all the elements of the traditional construction business and and it's a very niche aspect of construction. Um, so with Evolve, so first, actually, when I was a part of a company, I ended up leaving that and kind of branching out on my own. I started my own organization and moved out to New York. I saw a lot of opportunity in New York. There were a lot more homes, and there was less competition than Southern California, of course. And people have a misconception that if you're in cloudy areas or places where you don't see maybe sun year round, that solar might not be a good idea, but people don't realize the efficiency of the panels has
Uh,
drastically improved. And places like Denmark and Germany, they're like the highest density of residential solar, and they definitely don't see as much sun as even New York, right? So the panels are very efficient. It definitely makes sense for a multitude of reasons, not even including inflation. You're basically protecting, and people own homes, people own cars, but for whatever reason when it comes to electricity they don't have this concept or philosophy of, oh, I should also own my electricity. So I wanted to educate people. I saw a big gap, and New York we did well. We started scaling. We went down to Florida as well. It got to the point where we were even consulting with companies that were struggling a bit with sales. So it ended up being really, really strong, but we dealt with so many issues. We had cash flow problems because of supply chain issues, not being able to do installs in a timely manner, partnering with the wrong partners on the construction side. On the, general contractors are hard to deal with as it is, and solar, it's even more of a nightmare. Learned that firsthand. A lot of business crises, he's had to let go of the entire team and then had to rebuild from the ground up multiple times. And just recently, earlier this year, we actually got acquired by a company called IntelliSun, and I also got offered to come on board as vice president. So And the main reason I took that opportunity is because one, you want to really have a good team around you because there's so many moving parts. If you don't have a strong, ethical team that really understands the mission and they're very driven, it's very difficult. It can be like not just do you have to wear multiple different hats, but it's a lot of burden to take on yourself, and that's true for entrepreneurship in general. So, I found a really good team, a really good partner. I have to say, first and foremost, he's almost a mentor, and at the same time, to have such a lucrative opportunity to team up with him and work on much bigger projects. On the government side, big commercial projects, it's a privilege, and I'm very grateful for it. And to see that at one point in this industry, when I started, I was knocking doors, to now we're sitting in front of the government and pitching them on why, you know, solar is a good solution for AI data centers. It's kind of, night and day. It's been a crazy journey.
Of course. I mean, hearing that is almost empowering, I think, for a lot of people listening as well. I mean, you came from such a humble beginning and now, really, I think, kind of leading the pack in a lot of ways that, you're differentiating yourself. And I kind of want to touch on that as well. I mean, there's so many solar providers, hundreds, thousands, how does IntelliSun, stand out in terms of service and also approach?
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to the team. I think in any organization, as good as your product is, you're only as good as the sum of all the people that you're working with in the team. And again, credit to my partner in the business. I'm 31 years old. He's in his mid 50s, and I think there's a huge wisdom that comes with being that age. You've seen and dealt with so many different types of people. I'm still new, and being a young entrepreneur, it's hard not to get emotional, reactive to certain situations. So when you have someone that has embodies that wisdom, is more calm in stressful situations, you pick up on a lot. And one of the biggest things that I think I've learned from him thus far is his ability to recruit talent. That's a big piece of it. And I think when you recruit talent and they understand the mission, like I said, it 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 positively affects every interaction in the company, all the way from the customers up to management and everything in between. So, that's the biggest takeaway. And I would say what makes us stand out is we have a very human approach. I think, especially big companies, I don't want to mention names, but sometimes we see these big companies go bankrupt because they're so they have so much baggage, they have so much overhead, and they kind of lose that human touch because they just get too big to be personal.
Hmm.
Customer service becomes a big issue, and we kind of have an approach of what size we want to stay, so we can always be in touch with the customer, remember their birthdays, remember something that they mentioned, and we have systems around that to because it's impossible to remember every interaction and conversation you've had. But if you have a place to really keep it and good systems to follow up with people and nurture people that maybe decide solar's not the best thing for them right now, you end up giving them an exceptional experience. And we try to approach it like, we're selling essentially something that almost every other company is offering similar products. So if you can make the experience a little better and make it more of a white glove experience, we'll retain customers and we'll get a lot more referrals and have a better reputation.
That's fantastic. And then how are you getting these in front of these customers? I mean, I think a lot of it is obviously going to come from word of mouth, especially when, the service is top notch. You're mentioning that it's a white glove service. How is that, kind of translating into, future business and, potentially scaling not only from, residential, but commercial and now governmental? Like, how does that all kind of play
Yeah.
all together?
So I mean, how we're capturing customers is pretty, everyone, I've done everything. I've spent a lot of money on Facebook leads. I've spent a lot of money, different types of online marketing avenues. What we've seen be very effective, honestly, has been Google. SEO has been great. And ultimately, probably the highest quality of leads that we have, obviously, are referrals, but also when you have good reviews and a good online presence using social media, TikTok, Instagram, and there are random people commenting or past customers sharing their experiences, reviews, those people that call in, they're already pretty much 50% of the way there. They're pretty much sold.
Mhm.
They just need to understand, what the process is like, and if you can educate them properly, they'll move forward and they trust you. So that's on the residential side. Commercial, to be honest with you, we haven't spent a dime on marketing. It's been strictly references, referrals. I think that's a better way to approach commercial because there are so many gatekeepers. There's a lot of red tape. And government gets even crazier. So if you don't have some type of relationship, and what I mean by some type of relationship is, reach out to roofing companies and set up some type of affiliate partnership. Someone that already has a footprint, someone that has decades old relationships with all these companies. They've done past business, past performance is a big thing. So if somebody did business with someone already and then they're referring them or they're referring you, that person at the very least is going to at least listen and listen to your pitch. So that's what's
Hmm.
successful, just really good partnerships with existing businesses that have been around far longer than solar and convincing the owner, whoever it is, that we're the right company to partner with. And on the government side, we're kind of privileged enough to, my partner is actually a service disabled veteran. So because of that, we have a special designation, and most people don't, I don't know if they're aware of this. I wasn't aware of this, but the federal government actually favors veterans or minority owned businesses or women owned businesses where a certain percentage of government contracts have to be awarded to people that fall under that category. And that's kind of put us on the forefront of a lot of these projects. And as long as you have the competence, they'll give you a chance, they give you a shot, and they give you preference. So that's kind of how we've been able to generate business.
That's incredible. And I think one thing that kind of ties into that is, not only the customer satisfaction, but actually being able to, fulfill on your promises, which is huge. And I think a big part of that comes from the educating, which you're saying that you guys do a lot of. But, one thing that I think is very common in any business is objections. I mean, I want to know, and I'm kind of curious, like, what's a common customer objection that you're hearing in 2025? And, how do you help them move past it?
A really good question. So with rejections, I mean, sales, we all know the nature of sales is just the more rejections you can endure, the more likely you'll be successful. Um, and coming to the what's the business, I think this is probably true for everybody in the solar industry right now, especially with the recent executive order, the big beautiful bill, is just the fact that what is going to happen to this industry. You might not be here tomorrow or 5 years from now if your industry is basically going downhill. So what happens to my solar system in case you go out of business? So that's a big objection we hear, and I'll get to how I answer that. But before I say that, I want to say, in regards to the customer experience, we're not perfect. Like, we still make mistakes. Our process, as much as we want to perfect it, again, it's so complicated, and there's only so much that can be done in a day. The biggest thing I would say to fill that gap is, even when you mess up, is to just have strong communication with all the parties involved. And as long as you let the other party know, hey, we're working on it, I'm not ignoring you, I will get to you, I'm a human being that cares. I think that carries a lot of weight to people, where they continue to trust you and take your word for it. So that's a big thing: communication
Mhm.
with all the parties, internally, externally, et cetera, partners, and setting proper expectations. Saying you'll get back to them in a week, but then getting back to them in a month, that doesn't really help trust. So yeah, and
Exactly.
then some salespeople just, they like to do that to push them off, so they feel the pressure off of them. But then you're making the pressure that much more, it multiplies, because you
Mhm.
set improper expectations. So if it's really going to be a month because you're so busy and you need to push sales, then tell them it's going to be a month, and
Mhm.
apologize for it, and give them a gift card, and those things go a long way, right? So how you make up for it is a big piece of it. As far as how do we handle that objection, this is something I thought about as even from the beginning. I noticed that there were companies going out of business. So these massive billion-dollar companies, if they go out of business, who are we to say that we're going to be around forever? So one of the ways that we dealt with it, we actually partnered with an insurance company that isn't exclusive to solar, but they do home insurance, they do car insurance, and we were able to do a partnership with them where they actually insure the systems. And it's a premium that customers pay, but then it puts the ball in court, like, hey, we might go out of business, but this insurance company is not going anywhere, and they'll use third-party contractors in case anything ever happens to be able to address any problems you have. So no matter what, you're secured, and you're in a good place. You never have to worry about issues or pay out of pocket. So that's a big piece of our value proposition. I don't think many companies offer that.
Heard that ever, actually. So I think that's a very great, place to be, in a good avenue to kind of go down. And, obviously with utility pushback and, the changing incentive programs and stuff that you're mentioning, I think this is a part of how you keep your offer sharp and relevant. But, what else are you kind of adding other than just these, value propositions? Is there anything else that makes you kind of stand out and makes, you a more viable option to a customer?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's the core of it. Like, I think our edge is really the insurance, and the fact that you're not going to call a 1-800 number. You're always going to get a real person on the phone, and that we're available pretty much 7 days a week. I think the communication and the warranties, because other than that, you're essentially selling something very similar. We try to work on, getting better financing options than what's out there, than traditional methods. That's been helpful as well, especially for people with lower credit or that can't really afford it. So that's been a piece of the competitive edge. But to be quite honest with you, just recently, in the last would say even in the last month, just looking at the landscape. I think we're still going to have solar as an arm of the business, but we're starting to slowly pivot because not just this administration, but in general, just seeing the kind of direction that technology is going. Solar actually has been around, especially on the commercial industrial side, for almost 20 years,
Hmm.
maybe more. So now we're seeing a huge push for nuclear, and we're actually working on multiple things on the nuclear front to just make sure we're on the cutting edge of that as that starts to catapult. And that's more so on the large scale commercial or government applications, not as much residential. But I think as the technology improves, because we're in the very preliminary stage of this, um, I think there's actually a chance that for homeowners to some degree there will be some type of nuclear application on a very, very small scale as the technology is proven, as it's proven to be safe, as the nuclear regulations come into play. And that's kind of where we're thinking to pivot to. So we're working on our contacts and our network to make that pivot successful.
Fair enough. What needs to be set in place before you go down the nuclear route? Like what needs to be, explained? What kind of education has to go through, maybe yourselves, the company, what steps have to be taken to get there?
Yeah, so I mean, luckily it's not we're kind of falling, and this is kind of it's funny, like we kind of fell into commercial in a similar way where nuclear's happening. We're reaching out for to our commercial contacts to pitch them. And we're also I mean, the most we're doing is a lot of like maybe a little bit of email marketing. We just kind of started to see how we can drive more commercial business. And we're seeing a lot of data center development, obviously, because of artificial intelligence. Almost everybody that has any type of fund, private equity companies and beyond, they're all getting involved in artificial intelligence to some degree. But at the end of the day, the real money is not in the artificial intelligence itself. It's actually in building the data centers that go behind the artificial intelligence. We're seeing NVIDIA invest, trillions of dollars and the Middle East invest trillions of dollars in the US, and it's all around the concept of data centers. So, with the development of all these data centers, there's obviously going to be a huge need for electricity and power. And these power lines aren't going to cut it. The old traditional methods from World War I and II, it's just not going to be sufficient. And to
Hmm.
keep in mind, AI is just going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. You're going to need more and more electricity, more and more electricity. And they're picking rural areas that are far away from any urban development with vast amounts of land. So that's why we started approaching them for solar. But they said, no, we're not interested in solar. But if you can get your hands on any type of nuclear, and they gave us kind of a product sheet of what they're looking for, spec sheet, and a letter of intent as a response, we were like, wait, time out. What's the opportunity with nuclear? Where do we need to educate ourselves? Who are the players in nuclear? Let's get our hands on that since every single person's telling us the same thing. And that's kind of how that journey, I guess, started just again, just very recently, just exploring the different avenues with nuclear. So yeah, it's been already very crazy. I've been having meetings and it's gaining a lot of momentum, and I'm seeing that the demand is far, far greater than the supply. And I think one of the reasons is because there are very few players on it, because it's so new, and because the turnaround time can be up to 7 years. So if you can make it happen today, people will pay a massive premium for it, and they don't care because they'll capture their ROI on it. So, and that's kind of how the nuclear direction started.
That's huge. And I think with any new innovation, there's obviously going to be that kind of gray area or that like gold rush almost vibe where, people are coming towards it, but there's not enough information about it yet to really have public knowledge. So you guys are in really, niche in a very specific place, and it's exciting to hear about. But I also want to focus too much on that just because I know it is, fairly fresh and
Yeah,
new,
it's still
but
new, man. Well, maybe in 6 months or a year from now, I can answer a lot more questions about the nuclear side. I'm educating myself, as much as I possibly can. I'm meeting with people, and I have a lot. It's like a rabbit hole you can go down, and the technology is extremely complicated, and I'm sure it's going to evolve a lot over the next couple months and years. So it's you got to just stay and just keep educating yourself.
oh, of course. And I think with education comes with everything, right? Like no matter what it is that you're in, it's educating the public, it's educating yourself, the company, the people you work with. It's huge. I kind of want to tie that back, towards kind of the solar and almost like the sustainability energy conversation that we're having, where The words I've been hearing a lot are battery storage, and I just kind of want to talk about that with you because are you seeing any more interest in it? And even like grid independence, like how is IntelliSun kind of adapting to it all?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you guys, if the audience is familiar with California. California has something called net metering 3.0. And what that basically meant is that you could no longer sell power back to the grid. There were probably a multitude of reasons as to why that happened. So I won't get too political, but solar's still actually doing great in California. We'll see how things change with the incentives going away. But because the utility rates are just so astronomical in California compared to the rest of the country, as much as triple or quadruple the rest of the country, the rate, it still makes sense to go solar even with the purchase of a battery. So we're seeing, and I think kind of with all these natural disasters and storms and how much loss there is, the only alternative is like a gas generator that you have to consistently and constantly fill up with gas over and over again. Batteries basically just use the sun because it stores the energy from the solar system. So I think we're going to see more batteries. I think as battery technology improves, gets more efficient, lasts longer, has better warranty offers, the product is going to continue to evolve. So we're definitely going to see battery storage. And on the commercial side, yes, and I think also just from some of maybe not the big data centers, but the micro data centers, because they have to keep running constantly, and if they don't, then they lose money and they'll hurt their company's reputation in a big way. So there's a greater demand for batteries. So again, we're used to more of the residential side, but now we are talking to some manufacturers throughout the country. To understand more on the commercial storage side, because that demand is definitely actually increasing a lot.
That's huge. And while we're on the topic of batteries and storage, how do you think EV charging, like you mentioned, the AI powered data centers, but specifically AI powered monitoring or even smart grid integration, how will that affect? I want to specifically say residential solar in the next 3 to 5 years, and we can talk about commercial in a little bit.
Yeah. So you're saying smart grid integration, and yeah, I mean the reality is like with anything in regards to that, it's I hate to keep bringing up politics, but politics is just such a big piece of like and legislation is
Of
such a big
course.
piece of how things are directed. Like the government has a big influence, and if there's not a big incentive towards consumers and businesses, if there isn't some type of incentive structure, it makes it very difficult, especially in the beginning, because, we're not, if you're not creating this, if manufacturing is not happening at very large scale, the costs are very hard to validate without some type of push and incentive structure from the government. So it's hard to say, at least under this administration, but we've seen such a fluctuation, man. That's why I keep saying the solar coaster because, when Trump was in office, before, he had an unwinding kind of like slowly would unwind the incentive structure. And you saw things slowly fade, but it was still kind of okay. And then when the Biden administration came in, it was a huge push towards solar again, and he actually increased it. So there was like another solar renaissance. And now this time
Mhm.
we've never seen anything like this in the history of solar and renewable energy, where it's not an unwind process. He's quite literally killing the entire industry and removing every incentive to the point where there's already contracts that we have in place, but just because of the bureaucracy and the red tape and the process that it'll take outside of the federal government, just local governments, getting permission from the utility company to send power back, that process hold up means that our job is not going to get executed by December 31st, and they're not going
Mhm.
to claim the incentives, which is why their CFO or their accountant advised them that this is a good decision. So that was one of the big components of why they moved forward. And without that, it probably doesn't make as much financial sense. And you can't show any customer client in the world, hey, this is the deal, this is the price, this is that, and then they sign something, move forward, and now you go back on your promise. It doesn't really make out for a good they're not usually willing to compromise if you change
Mhm.
the numbers drastically, and that's what's happening, I think, in the industry overall, and that even applies to smart grid. It's really hard without the government incentives, at least right now.
Fair enough. And I think that's part of, I guess, like learning the hard way, right? Like you really have to go through kind of the motions and really figure out what kind of estimates and what kind of educated guesses you can make about, how the markets are going to change, how things are going to evolve. I think it's huge in any kind of market or any kind of industry. And I think that kind of leads into the last segment here. But, What's something that you've learned the hard way as a leader in this space?
Loaded question, Eric. So many things, man. And I think it's more related to like myself and self growth, personal growth, and entrepreneurship. I don't know if I would have even gone this route if I knew what I had to go through the last couple of years, to be honest with you. And I would advise anybody listening that wants to do not just solar, but like, in the entrepreneurial space, I can give a lot of, I guess, tidbits. I'm kind of too deep into the industry now. My relationships are embedded here, and I'm riding the wave, I guess, in a way. But if I went back, I think, certain things, if you're a young entrepreneur and you haven't started yet, I would say definitely look for something that's reoccurring, even if it's a smaller amount. If you can close a deal one time and then can't get compensated on it month after month, look for a product that's some type of sale that revolves around that. That's huge. And I know we hear that, but that has huge impact. I see my buddies in the tech industry and other industries where um, they have a lot less headache, I guess, to a degree, in regards to that. If you can find something that's an instant deliverable that doesn't have all the components of construction, probably a little bit of an easier route. So know what you're
Mhm.
getting yourself into. Ask people worst case scenario before you ask them how much money they're making in best case, because money at the expense of your peace is not really wise. You can have more money, but if you're robbed of your peace and health, does it really matter? Like, are you effectively going to enjoy that money? Probably not. So I think sometimes, as being young in the social media age generation, you get blinded by wealth. So I think that's really important. Those are questions to ask. And I would say, like, big lessons for me, man, just God, bro. I don't think it's the smartest person, right? And
Mhm.
Darwin's theory, it stands true in entrepreneurship more than anything else. It's just your ability to adapt and change to the changing environment. Like, I've seen so many guys come and go in solar, and the industries and space is getting smaller. And the guys that have kind of endured all the storms, they're kind of sticking together. Keep your competition close. You can learn a lot from your competition. You can collaborate with your competition, and you end up realizing that your competition, eh, you know, you in a weird way you help each other more than you harm each other. And
Mhm.
that's a big misconception people have in business. Competition is actually a very good thing, a very healthy thing, and you're able to send each other business, and it leads to a lot of amazing things. We're seeing now more and more companies come together and do, collaborate on products, shoes, sneakers, fashion brands, whatever it is. And there's a big reason for it, and I think that's an evolution of business in general. So I would say, like, your ability to change, resilience, you got to have thick skin. And one of the things that I'm working on right now is, you have ups and downs in business, but your emotional state, like, how can you stay at homeostasis as much as possible through the ups and downs? So not letting the winds get to your head too much and make you so high, because you're going to come off like a
Mhm.
bipolar person, because when things are bad, you're going to take it too personally and it's going to hurt. You're going to hit the floor and it's going to suck, and you're going to make it too much about you. So I think taking the ego out and just learning to be calm and focus more on what you can control, which is generic, but more so like, hey, I closed 1,000 sales yesterday, or $10,000 worth of sales yesterday. I'm still going to get up tomorrow as if every day, and treat every day like a new day, and just start from zero.
Mhm.
No matter how good your day was the day before or how bad your day is, just get up and just do it again. Put your shoes on and show up, and just do the things that you already know make you successful. I don't think everyone needs to know what that is, but having structure in your day and just attacking every day like it's a brand new day, wherever you are in your journey, and network with people. Like, get a support group. My friends that are most of my friends, none of my friends are in the solar industry, so they don't understand the pain and the things. It's too much out of context for them to even relate or give support. So the only people that really understand are the people in the industry going through something similar, and having that support group, having a soundboard, having a partner, and a community that you can kind of vent to, and figure out how you're going to grow through this. I think that's really important, and that helps with the resilience. So resilience doesn't mean that you have to weather things on your own. I think it also means that you need to have a good support group, and not just your wife and your kids and your family and whatever, because they don't understand what you're really going through. But having people specifically in the industry at the caliber that you are, having that is so impactful. And I wish I knew that earlier.
That's nice. And I think that's advice to, any entrepreneur, any person ever really. Like it's not really specific to just solar, which I think is beautiful, right? Like you can really apply, a certain skill set or a certain mindset anywhere you go. So I think it's massive. And I think just to kind of close off, it's always a fun question I like to ask, but if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about the industry you're in right now, what would it be?
Dude, this is easy, man. I wish that if we got a contract signed today, that we didn't need to go through all of the long process of getting permission and permitting and interconnection. I wish that if we got a contract signed today, that we could start construction within a week or a day or 2 or 3 days. Because if that happened, we would see a lot more successful companies, a lot more successful salespeople, and a lot more people that would probably stay in the industry, even without the incentives. I think the long timelines that drag along when a salesperson, operations people put all this time and energy, and then the customer ends up canceling or gets cold feet or is advised by a friend and family that it's not a good idea, all that time and work you put into it, you don't get rewarded on. And the company ultimately loses out on the revenue and you get discouraged for all the effort that you put in. So if it was an instant deliverable or very quick deliverable, I think that's the one thing if I could wave a magic wand, I would definitely wish for that.
I think a lot of people would really agree with that. I think up here in Canada, it's one of the biggest things we face. I mean, we're even for residential, we're looking at 3, sometimes 4 months before systems, turned on,
Hurts, man,
and
because you have
it's
your bills are due every 30 days. Like your credit companies don't care. Your line of credit, everything is due. You have to pay employees every week or biweekly. And at the end of the day, like if the job doesn't work, then you lost all that money for the last 3, 4 months of money you had to put out. So it creates a lot of cash flow problems. And we all know at the end of the day in business, everyone says, yeah, make a lot of money. Yeah, the revenue is great in solar, but like cash flow is a huge obstacle. And that's why a lot of companies fail. They can't manage that cash flow gap.
exactly. No, that's huge. And where can people go and find more information about, IntelliSun, about you, and kind of the entire mission?
Yeah, so we have a website. It's intellisun.net, IntelliSun.net, if you want to put that in like the show notes. And then my personal Instagram is Adil, ADIL, MALIK underscore 2. And I also have actually a Instagram that I've created recently to just share some of my entrepreneurial journey and not just with business, but also relationships and other things. You know, life is very robust. We might see somebody that's successful. I have a podcast called Fail Up. If you guys want to listen to it, yeah, all right, I'm definitely gonna have you on there as well. So if you guys want to listen to more,
Everything.
and you can follow me on Instagram, DM me with any questions. I'm more than happy to answer. I love giving advice for free. I love what you're doing here. I think this is very impactful, and it's important that people listen to this stuff. There weren't as many voices when I started my journey, so it's nice to see that more people are trying to put the message out there and to really just democratize the value of all this that you're doing here. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the kind words. That's fantastic. I mean, that's the whole, mission and energy that's getting put into this. I don't think I've really said it live on air, but this is meant to educate. This is meant to be kind of a central location for people to come and get answers to their questions, to understand what the technology is, to really figure out what kind of incentives they have, what kind of tax credits they can, pull out of their back pocket. You can really see, what's actually available to you if this is something that's interesting to you, if this is something that you care about. So that's where this all kind of comes from. And, Adil, you've been a fantastic guest. So
Appreciate
everybody,
it.
that was Adeel Malik from IntelliSun giving us a real look at what it takes to stand out, scale smart, and, really serve customers with energy solutions that actually work. So to learn
Awesome.
more, like you said, about him and his team's work, head to IntelliSun.net or check them out on social media, like you mentioned. And don't forget to follow Off the Grid on the Record on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, or honestly, wherever you get your podcasts for more unfiltered voices in the clean energy. So until next time, everybody, thank you, Adil, and take care.
Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on today.
Amazing. Thanks. Bye bye.